The world held its breath. A collective pause was felt across continents. A new era was beginning for the Catholic Church, one filled with hope and anticipation. After months of discussions and speculation, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle had been elected as the new pope. He chose the name Pope Paschal III, a title that reflected humility, peace, and a deep sense of responsibility. Now, the moment had come for his first address to the world. Millions of people had traveled to Rome, their hearts filled with faith and excitement. St. Peter's Square was overflowing with people, with crowds spilling into the streets beyond. Giant screens were set up across the city, and people from all over the world were watching. The entire globe was tuned in, waiting to hear his first words. All eyes were fixed on the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. The newly elected pope would soon step out, standing before the faithful for the first time as their leader. The air was thick with anticipation. This was more than just a speech. It was a historic and spiritual moment that would be remembered for generations. As the grand doors of the basilica slowly opened, a deep hush fell over the massive crowd. Pope Paschal XV emerged, dressed in simple white vestments, a symbol of humility and grace. His presence was commanding yet gentle. He carried the weight of history on his shoulders, but there was a warmth in his eyes that comforted those who saw him. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, with many people overcome with emotion. Some wept, others bowed their heads in silent prayer. In that moment, the world felt united. The Pope's presence alone had already begun to heal wounds and offer hope to millions. He stepped forward, placing his hands gently on the lectern before him. The square fell into a deep silence so profound that even the faint rustling of the wind could be heard. People held their breath, waiting to hear the words that would define this new chapter in the Church's history. His voice broke the silence. It was not loud, yet it carried immense strength. It was the voice of a shepherd, a leader, and a servant, all at once. "My brothers and sisters," he began, his voice filled with warmth and sincerity, "I stand before you today not as a ruler, but as a servant, a humble servant of God and of you, his people." His words were simple yet powerful. He did not speak as a distant figure of authority, but as a man deeply connected to the people before him. He acknowledged the weight of their hopes, their fears, and their struggles. He spoke of faith, of love, and of the responsibility that came with being part of a global family. He addressed the great challenges of the world, the growing divide between the rich and the poor, the pain of war and conflict, the struggles of the marginalized. Yet his words were not filled with despair. Instead, they carried a message of hope, of unity, and of the power of faith to overcome darkness. He spoke of the need for compassion, for understanding, and for breaking down the walls that separate people. He called upon Catholics and people of all faiths to work together to build a better world, to reject hatred and division, and to embrace peace. His words reached deep into the hearts of the young, the old, the lost, and the faithful. They resonated across languages, cultures, and borders. His message was not just for Catholics, it was for humanity as a whole. "We are all children of God," he proclaimed, his voice steady and full of conviction. "No matter our race, our background, or our beliefs, we must learn to see each other as brothers and sisters." The Pope's message of unity was a powerful response to the rising tide of division and intolerance in the world. He urged people to see diversity not as a threat but as a strength. He reminded them that humanity shares a common home and a shared destiny. He called upon leaders, communities, and individuals to work together for the greater good. Compassion was at the heart of his address. He spoke about the responsibility of the Church to serve the poor, the weak, and the forgotten. He condemned the greed that had led to vast inequalities and urged the faithful to take action to bring justice to the world. His words were not empty promises. They were a call to action. He reminded the faithful that true belief is not just about prayer. It is about serving others, about living the values of love and kindness every day. Pope Paschal III's message was also one of renewal. He acknowledged the mistakes of the past and expressed a desire for openness and humility, in addressing the challenges of the present. He spoke of the importance of listening, not just to church leaders, but to everyday people, especially the young, who represent the future of faith. As he continued, his words flowed like a river, touching the hearts of those who listened. He spoke of the potential for the church to adapt, to grow, and to become a guiding light in modern times while staying true to its roots. His voice echoed across the square, reaching people far beyond the Vatican walls. From bustling cities to the most remote villages, his message was heard. Global leaders paused to listen. Some were moved by his words of peace and unity, while others felt challenged by his call for social justice. But no one could ignore the weight of his speech. As he concluded his address, a wave of emotion swept through the crowd. Spontaneous applause erupted, growing louder and stronger until it filled every corner of the square. Tears streamed down faces. The faithful stood in awe, knowing they had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for generations. A new chapter had begun. Pope Paschal XIII had spoken, and his words had captured the world. He had not just delivered a speech, he had ignited a movement of faith, love, and renewal. As the sun began to set over Rome, casting a golden glow over the square, a deep sense of peace settled over the people. The challenges facing the world were immense: poverty, war, environmental crises. But in that moment there was hope. The Pope's words had lit a spark, a guiding light in dark times. His leadership would not be easy, and the road ahead would be filled with obstacles. But with faith, unity, and compassion, he had offered a way forward. His message was clear. This was not just a new beginning for the Catholic Church, but for all humanity. It was a call to build a world where love, justice, and understanding prevailed. And so, the journey toward that vision began. The faithful left St. Peter's Square that evening, not just as spectators of history, but as participants in a movement that had the power to change the world.